Okay, so now we're going to hook everything together. This blanket was drying for about an hour with the eyelet, so the glue was nice and hard. It looks like it dried, I think, quite well. Normally I dry it overnight, but again, about an hour with that heat really made this solidify. This will probably still take another day for it to be, again, this extreme hard that they talk about. You see what I did is I cut the center out. So the trick to this is just take your hobby knife, make sure you've got a nice sharp blade, and just start slicing around the edge, and eventually you can cut it out. What's interesting is that you might be able to cut most of it, then grab onto it, try pulling it, but it's just simply not going to break, so you just have to keep slicing at it with a knife until it pops out. I've not found an easy way to take that out. So now let's go ahead and attach everything together. The felt blanket with the eyelet, our cord, and the nose cone. So the first thing we want to do is connect the nose cone. So take the nose cone and we slide a small loop through it. And pull it through. Now this knot will probably not go through the eyelet. That's okay, it doesn't have to. We take the big loop and we slide it through the small loop, like this. And we just pull it through. Okay, so now we just have that slip knot, which is now attached to our nose cone. Okay, the next step is a little bit more difficult. We want to attach our blanket to the nose cone. But the trick to this is that we want to make sure this blanket is attached very, very close. And the reason is that the blanket does a couple of different jobs. This is Kevlar, so it is somewhat heat resistant, and this will protect the streamer. But another issue is that the streamer itself, when it's inside the rocket accelerates, the streamer can slide down. I've had it happen to several flights, and the flight failed. I go, what happened? Until I finally figured out what was going on. The streamer slid down, and when the ejection charge went off, this plugged the bottom, and it blew apart the streamer, blew it into a million bits. That happened. Another time, this plugged up the engine, and the engine ejected. That, again, was also a problem. Another problem is that it plugged up, and the nose cone came off, but the streamer stayed stuck. Another problem is that this slid down and became unstable. This rocket went spiraling around. So I did have a point where I had many failed flights until I realized the problem was that the streamer was sliding back and forth. So using this Kevlar blanket and tying this very close to the nose cone, then wrapping it, this will keep the streamer close to the nose cone and keep it from sliding down. Again, very, very important thing to do. And that's usually not talked about because most of the time they use a streamer that's only 2 feet long. You just kind of toss it in here and it just kind of unwinds. And you just kind of blow it out. And it's, again, 2 feet long. Well, this is a 25-foot streamer. It's a lot more difficult to eject. So let's go ahead and connect this to the nose cone. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put this through the hole. Again, we want this to be as close to the nose cone as possible. Now, the nose cone knot is down here. I'm actually going to pull that knot through here too, because therefore I can, again, get this closer. And another feature of what this blanket does, again, there's a lot of reasons why this blanket is important, is that when you put the streamer in and fold it over like this, it holds the streamer and keeps it from unwinding. I had a series of failures where the streamer would unwind inside the body tube, and when the ejection charge went off, it blew the center of the streamer out, and the outside of the streamer was stuck inside. Other situations, it just doesn't, it unwinds and it just doesn't eject at all. So again, it's very, very important that this step is done correctly because we want to have this Kevlar felt blanket close to the nose cone to keep that center of balance forward. And then this, of course, will eventually fold over to protect our streamer. I'll show you how to build the streamer in the video after this. So now we're just going to tie a very, very simple knot. We've all done this thousands of times. And again, this is close to the nose cone, as close as we can get. We're going to tie one more simple knot on this. So these are just your very simple knots that everybody learns when they're in first grade. Nothing fancy. And 2 of them seems to really, oops, looks like I missed. That worked here. Oh, I see. I think I let the Kevlar slide on the other side. Okay. So now we have 2 simple knots. Now, it might look like it's a tangle mess, but this is actually very important because the nose cone is attached to the eyelet. So the nose cone is going to be pulling on the eyelet. And this is not going to have a lot of force. And the force now is connected to this metal piece. So when the force of the rocket pulls, it's going to pull on the eyelet. It's not going to pull on the nose cone. Eventually we're going to connect a streamer on there too. So all the forces now are on this metal eyelet rather than on the nose cone. The only force on the nose cone is the weight of the nose cone, which is very simple for this little plastic eyelet to handle. So, okay, so now we have the blanket attached to the nose cone. Now we need to attach the nose cone and the blanket to the rocket body. First thing we do is we take a piece of heat shrink, and I have this box of heat shrink that I bought, various sizes. I'm going to be using a 3/32, which is the smallest one. The reason is this is the smallest swivel. On larger rockets, I use larger swivels, in which case I use the 1/8 inch, but this is the smallest swivel that I can find, and this is going to use the 3/32. Swivel size here is not that critical because the force of these swivels that are used for fishing are generally 50, 100 pounds, and we're not dealing with anything quite that severe. So again, smallest swivel will do just fine, and the 3/32 is going to be used to hold the knot in place. So I'll show you how to do that. I have a piece of 3/32 heat shrink here, and I'm going to thread this through the loop. Now remember before I mentioned that this loop needs to be somewhat big so we can pass the nose cone through. When you have this piece of heat shrink here, you may not be able to get it over that knot, so it makes your loop a little bit smaller effectively. So make sure this loop is oversized. If I pull it really, really hard, I can force this over this so I can reclaim a little bit more space in the knot. And we'll just leave it like this, and we'll be fine. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is to connect this by sticking it through the swivel. Put this through this loop. The swivel is doing its job. It keeps on jumping away from me. There we go. So now the trick is we want to pass the nose cone and the felt blanket through the big loop, and this will connect it onto the swivel. And again, notice all of these things are knots. If you do them in the reverse order, you can take everything apart. Let's say your felt blanket gets burned, or maybe it gets torn, or maybe you want to put a bigger one in for a longer streamer, or maybe just a smaller one to save a little bit of space. There's plenty of options, and you can very easily take everything apart. Okay, so as we pull this together, again, it's the same thing. We got this overhand loop, or not whatever it is. When we pull this tight, Kevlar is really springy, so what's going to happen is if once we release the tension, the knot goes like this. It just simply pops apart. So if we don't do something, this knot's going to wrap around here. It's going to slide back and forth, and this is going to tangle. In which case, we lose the effectiveness of the swivel. It's no longer going to help us with the spin. It's just going to start tangling up. So on this side, we took care of the problem by shrinking the heat shrink. But this is permanent, so this now stays like this. We can't remove that. Actually, if you do need to remove that, you simply reheat this heat shrink, and then very carefully just kind of rub the rubber apart with a hobby knife. You should be able to pull that apart. Okay, but on this side, we don't want to make it permanent. We want to make it temporary. So what we do is we pull this knot as tight as we can get it. We hold it there. Now we take our piece of heat shrink, again, keep holding that knot. I take the heat shrink and we just push it over the knot and over the swivel. And that's it. We're done. So now this will stay in place. Now I haven't flown these too many times, maybe once or twice. I've never had any problem with this piece of heat shrink shrinking down from the ejection charge. It's highly unlikely it's going to because it takes several seconds for this to shrink, and the ejection charge is over in just a fraction of a second. So if you want to take everything apart, you can just pull this down, pull the knot through, and then pull the nose cone back through with the blanket, and just keep on doing everything in reverse order, and you take it all apart. Maybe put a new blanket on, use a longer cord, whatever you want to do. That's the fun thing about an injection system like this, that you can play with it. You can change it around, do whatever you want. So now we're all set with our recovery system here. This is really, really nice. And again, inside of this, there's no anchor, so this is just a nice, smooth slide. Everything just ejects really nice, and there's no problems with ejection. So now we're done with the entire recovery system. We got the blanket, we got the nose cone. This is tied very, very close. And again, very, very close because we want to keep that center of balance very far forward. And this will keep it from sliding down on acceleration. It's going to keep the streamer together, keep it from unwrapping. Very, very important. All these features, all these problems I experience are all solved with this one blanket on its own. Okay, so now that we've got this in place, the next step is I'm going to show you how to make a streamer module. This streamer module I'm going to tie here, and it drops in right there, and we fold it up like this. You slide it in, and we're ready for launch. So I'm going to show you how to make that in the next few videos. It's actually pretty easy, but I do it in a somewhat sophisticated way to make these a much more effective streamer. I'll show you how I do all that stuff on my next few videos.